Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be able to present some of the ideas and highlights of the report that we co-wrote, and to be able to do this in person. Let's just first remember or remind ourselves of the context, and maybe some of that context may not be fully transparent to some of you. This is how NASA measures CO2 concentration in the atmosphere in Hawaii. And what you see here is essentially a straight line. And this is all the more striking that we've been ramping up efforts to try and reduce carbon emissions since 2015, the Paris Agreement, but there has been essentially no impact of any of those efforts. And if you look at annual CO2 emissions, the news is not great either. In 2022, last year, global CO2 emissions from human activity were 36.8 gigatons of CO2. And the year before, you see there was a little valley, a little blip, and that was COVID. So COVID was painful. COVID helped reduce carbon emissions, but it didn't reduce carbon emissions very much. And to give you a sense of what 36.8 gigatons of CO2 means, according to the IPCC, if we want to avoid a warming of more than 1.5 degrees centigrade, then we have a carbon budget, a remaining carbon budget of 300 gigatons as of 2020, which means that our remaining carbon budget as of today is more like 220, and you will know, you can do the math, what that will be next year and so on. This table highlights the challenge. You can see where we are under current policies and the projections for emissions, and you see how much we have to reduce emissions by 2030 if we want to avoid an increase in temperatures of more than 1.5 degrees. Now, maybe Paris hasn't had a big impact yet. What Paris has achieved is really it was a wake-up call, and the good news is that governments, corporations, banks, they've all responded to that wake-up call. And there's been a dramatic change globally on net zero commitments. You see here that today we have 88% of emissions are under some form of commitment to decarbonize. 4 years ago, that was 10%. So it's a huge increase in efforts, and they will be gradually implemented. And our report is really emphasizing how digital technology will have an important role to play in this coming effort. Let me start by stating the obvious. We've already had an experiment highlighting the value of digital technology, the COVID pandemic. The COVID pandemic was less painful as feared, the lockdowns. The output loss was less severe than feared. COVID pandemic allowed us to reduce emissions without paying a even worse price in terms of lost output, lost consumption, and so on. How was that possible? Because of digital technology. Think of Zoom. We all have used Zoom extensively. Zoom has been a lifesaver for many of us, locked up somewhere. But the digital technology has many other benefits that it brings already now. Let me mention one of the main ones, which is cloud computing. And as you can see here on the chart, there's been a huge increase in data center workloads, internet traffic, yet data center energy use has been constant. And that's thanks to cloud computing. Cloud computing saves a lot of unnecessary duplication. It offers many services already, infrastructure, platform, software, and model as a service. But let's not paint too rosy a picture of a digital technology. Digital technology makes us all more efficient, but this is a well-known idea. Greater efficiency has rebound effects. And when you hear rebound effects, you want to remind yourself of Jevons paradox. Rebound effects can undo the benefits from greater efficiency. And one area where you see this is in ride-hailing services. Ride-hailing services are a huge potential in terms of reducing carbon emissions from transport. But in fact, the way they've been used, they've actually led to an increase in emissions. Okay, so now let me turn to the circular economy. So that's the other part of the report. The circular economy is essential if we want to be able to maintain our lifestyles, maintain our consumption, but become more environmentally friendly at all levels, and in particular in reducing our carbon footprint. The basic point of the report is that as much as there have been many initiatives on the circular economy around the world, what they have in common is that they lack scale. And if you want to scale those initiatives to really have an impact, you need digital technology. And that's why we are calling our report the digital circular economy. And this was mentioned in the earlier presentation. Digital technology helps us all along the production cycle, consumption cycle in facilitating recycling and reducing final waste. So here you have a little graph, digitalization, circularity. Digitalization is about virtualization, data monitoring, optimization, connectivity. Circularity is about what I've just said, circular input, product use extension, resource recovery, sharing platforms, product as a service, and it's a two-way street. All of these circularity benefits are enhanced, can be scaled up with digital technology. However, and this is the other big point of the report, it's not just about technology. It's also about how technology fits into society, the economy, changes social habits, and makes them more sustainable. And that doesn't just happen without any intervention. That happens, it has to happen in a guided way, and that calls for policy intervention to realize the full potential of this technology, this transformation. You need governance, innovations, you need to make citizens stakeholders in the digital circular economy, and that requires additional work. We have many examples in the report. Some of the examples were mentioned in the previous presentation of wonderful initiatives already that go in this direction. Let me just mention one here, which is idle fish, which I'm sure many of you in this room have used. This being China, idle fish, one application, one platform, 300 million users, and 20 million users every day. So it's already reached a massive scale. It's already produced significant avoided emissions of the order of 25 million tons of CO2. And it works because, well, first of all, people want it. It makes it easier for people, buyers and sellers of secondhand goods, to match, to trust each other for exchange. And that's no small feat, because we know that secondhand markets are meant to be inefficient, and there's meant to be market breakdown in secondhand markets. But idle fish somehow is able to overcome that, thanks to digital technology. And then idle fish also works because a lot of thought has been put into how it enhances people's willingness and ability to reduce their environmental impact. Of course, when you think about something like second-hand markets, you worry, here's a potential rebound effect, and that's been seen in other platforms, not for idle fish. What kind of rebound effect? Well, if you can easily resell a piece of clothing, then next thing you do is, having sold your second-hand piece of clothing, you buy something else. And so that could actually enhance consumption and have an overall negative effect. Now, I think the big promise on digital circular economy is a proposal by in Europe, by the European Green Deal, which is to have a digital product passport for all inputs that makes them traceable and makes it much easier to recycle and to dismantle used products, manufactured products. So I've already mentioned this, but the point, so we refer to a concept in sociology that's referred to as the socio-technical system, to emphasize that it's not just about new business models, it's not just about new technology, it's also about how society adapts to these new technologies in a productive way, in the way you want, and that's not always the case if you leave it to laissez-faire. And I've mentioned it already. Ride-hailing platforms, Uber, Lyft, Didi, none of these have actually fulfilled the promise of reduced net carbon emission reductions. So let me conclude and make 4 points about the digital pathway to net zero and how to implement the transition to net zero carbon. First point, general point, which was, I'm echoing again, was mentioned earlier. Digital technology allows us to measure at a very granular level and report carbon emissions. And that's true for direct and indirect emissions. Former Vice President Al Gore refers to this idea as the new age of radical transparency. And what he means by that is real-time transaction level monitoring, and where, of course, big data and AI can play an important role. The second dimension is the design of efficient markets for carbon offsets. So earlier presentation mentioned the green points that have been introduced by Alibaba, you can generalize that idea. You can have carbon credits, carbon offsets that individuals create through more responsible consumption, through lower carbon footprints, and they can profit financially from creating those carbon offsets and selling them in an organized and efficient carbon offset market. And again, here, a digital platform will be very, very useful. Here, let me throw out one suggestion, and then I will stop. Okay, so this is not in the report, and this is maybe not a very good idea. It's just half-baked, but I thought, you know, I would put it out and see what your reactions are. We could already today do something very simple through digital technology and bringing in consumers more, customers more, and that is to invite customers that are on various platforms, not just to rate the quality of the service, the quality of the product they're buying, which is now universal and very important aspect, but they could also rate how green the service is and how green the product is. Now, what we know about the quality ratings is that a priori, this could go wrong. People could have very different opinions. It could be very uninformative. But what we know is that somehow aggregation of opinions through the crowd does reveal a lot of information. All of us pay attention to whether it's 3 stars, 4 stars, or 5 stars. And we make choices based on that. And of course, companies understand that and they respond to it. Now, the same thing could potentially be done, who knows? It's as an experiment for green ratings. So let me conclude here. Actually, there's one last concluding slide. Digital circular economy provides innovative solutions in practice, greener digitalization, circularity, and of course, along with that, helps with standardization. And all the new technologies are now being developed to protect data and protect privacy. It empowers consumers to consume in a more responsible way, and it empowers businesses to encourage their own business and their supply chain to be more responsible.